Hello, everyone. Okay, so I'm back today to do a live to talk about the use of personality tests, well, kind of personality tests, strength finders, those kind of thing in the interior journey. Now, that's something very specific and very particular. I know we're generally familiar with many different kinds of personality tests, like the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram, the Imagenetics, maybe the Gallup Strengths Finders, for example, or the Big Five, DISC. There are just so many different kinds of personality tests or strengths assessments, or maybe spiritual gifts inventory and discernment processes. How do these relate to the interior journey? Do they relate to the interior journey? This is not something that I've heard people really kind of like analyze or talk about. And I think it's very important because many of these tests are not designed for the purpose of making the interior journey, right? But they can be a great asset if we know how to use them or apply them for the interior journey. Okay, so in my signature group coaching container, Clarity, I make use of two different instruments, I guess you could call it. One is the motivation code, and the other is the Myers-Briggs Step 2 instrument, which is different from just the usual Step 1. Okay. I don't want to go in too much into the nitty-gritty of this because it's not really necessary for you to know. What I want to cover in this video is just generally for you to understand why personality tests are not on their own equipped to help us in the interior journey. And therefore, why it is maybe sometimes when we do these tests, we kind of end up feeling a bit meh, like, it's helpful for a little bit, and then we don't quite know how to get more mileage out of it, especially in terms of our relationship with God or discerning our personal vocation. I think if we're honest, it's just kind of like fun for a little while, and then we don't really get more value out of these tests that we do, right? And I want to take a look after that at, a bit more particularly at how I use these instruments in Clarity, just so you understand. Okay, so let me just bring up the slides. And I just want to say at any point, if you have any questions, because this is a live, just please type your questions into the comments section on Instagram. I'll come back and check later. Okay, so today's session, two main points. One is why most personality tests or workshops, that kind of stuff, why they're not helpful to the interior journey specifically. And the second big point would be why the motivation code or the MCODE and the MBTI Step 2 instruments are the ones that I've chosen to use in Clarity and how they will be used to help the interior journey. Okay, I think there are kind of a couple of words missing on the slide there, but that's meant to be how they will be used to help the interior journey. Okay, so first, always helpful to have a reminder, what do we mean, or what do I mean when I'm talking about the integrated interior journey? Okay, so because that's what we want to help ourselves make progress in. I always define it or explain this as, you want to know with greater clarity who you are, right? Your true identity in a sense, and how to live, choose, and respond from who you are authentically, unapologetically, with integrity, confidence, and compassion, right? So it's not just about knowing who you are, like knowing about yourself more, but being able to ground your living from that identity, that true identity, so that the way you experience yourself is confident, authentic, unapologetic. Okay, so that's one dimension of the interior journey. And the other dimension would be that, as we get to know ourselves, who we are truly, and how we can ground ourselves to live more authentically and confidently and unapologetically and lovingly as our true selves, we wish to also know, the unique path that we have, the unique work and contribution that we were created to to gift the world, right? Just through us being us. It's not just about what we can do, although that's a part of it, but it's really about who we are. So the more we know who we are and we live from that, naturally what we do and how we do things become that unique gift that we are to the world, and that's our personal vocation. So making the integrated interior journey also has this dimension that we hope to discern with greater and greater clarity over time, how we're called to live, how we're called to do things. Okay, so it's not even just what we do, but how we do what we do is unique to us. There are certain ways that if we're very aligned, if we're aware of our design and we're aligned with it, we're just that much more effective and empowered to act in the world, right? So that's a dimension of what we also wish to grow into in the integrated interior journey. So now, most personality tests and workshops, etc., they are not designed in themselves, right, to help you be more authentic, to be more grounded, or to help you be more radically accepting of yourself or more surrendered to God. That's not what these tests are designed to do. It's usually not what they have in mind. And I would even say that even if we're talking about something more spiritual, like a charism discernment process, right, where you're guided to discern what your charisms are, that particular part of the journey where you're just trying to find out where your gifts are in and of itself doesn't help you be more authentic, in and of itself doesn't help you to be more grounded or to accept yourself more radically. And we know this because, I know this because actually the thing is not part of clarity, but another instrument you could say, or assessment that I have been trained to give or to facilitate would be a charism discernment process, called and gifted charism discernment workshop. And when we do individual interviews with people, we see something that come up quite often, which is sometimes people have specific spiritual gifts that they really want, and then they're disappointed if it's not showing up, or they are quite convinced that they have a gift, and then you can kind of feel like there's an attachment to a particular kind of outcome, and they're not really detached and indifferent, spiritually indifferent to what God may be revealing to them. Or sometimes there's a particular gift that they really don't want for whatever reason, and it makes it harder for them to see the possibility that this is a gift that God has given them. So what I just described, right, that is something apart from the discernment of your personality or your giftings. That has something to do with the human foundation within yourself and your relationship with yourself, which is a big part of the interior journey, right? But all these instruments, these personality tests or gift tests and all that kind of thing, they're not designed to ground you or help you be more authentic, okay? They're part of it, but they don't do that. So if we don't understand that, if you just go through a workshop or like a gifts workshop or a personality workshop, that kind of thing, you won't know quite how to integrate that with your interior journey, okay? Because it's not built into their design. For a resource to help with our interior journey, and I've mentioned this before in the series of videos that I did, a 5-part series about how to choose the right interior journey resources for yourself. Okay, one of the videos is specifically about how to identify if a resource helps the interior journey. There are many dimensions to personal development and growth, right? Some resource could help us with our pastoral effectiveness, how we serve others, or how good we are as in terms of our relationship with others, for example. Or it may build our knowledge, but those are very distinct and different from the interior journey. So for a resource to help with our interior journey, it must help us connect with, engage, heal, and integrate our core, okay, the core of ourselves. Any kind of reflection that we go through that only remains at the intellectual level but does not integrate our emotions, our body, and touch our inner core, then these resources would be insufficient to help the interior journey. Okay, so to help the interior journey, it has to go beyond the intellectual level to incorporate all these dimensions of us and even touch the core of ourselves. So something that I keep returning to as well in my content is the 3 layers of life. Okay. And the outermost layer, so, you imagine there's like 3 concentric layers, or in my podcast, I think episode 4, when I introduced this concept, I used the image of an avocado, right? You have the skin of the avocado, which is the outermost layer, and then you have the flesh of the avocado, and then you have the seed of the avocado. So the outermost layer is the outer layer. And when we talk about personality tests, a lot of times what is being measured is our behavior, how we come across to others. Okay, so for example, in the DISC, and how high do we rate in dominance or conscientiousness, for example? And a lot of times there's a dimension of we want to know how we show up. This is because a lot of these instruments are used in the context of work, organizations and corporations, or let's say team building. So it's important to know how people come across to each other, right? Their behavior. So when we talk about the outermost layer, that's the first layer of the layers of life, and most personality tests would touch on the outermost layer, on our behavior. The inner layer, the next middle layer, would be the layer of our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, and our bodily sensations and feelings, right? Some personality instruments do look at like our thinking preferences, our cognitive preferences. So it goes a little into, the way we think. It doesn't really touch on like our beliefs or our thoughts, right? Or actual emotions. So it's just kind of like touching a little bit on the inner layer. I haven't experienced any personality tests that help me connect with my body or my bodily feelings. I think that's something quite apart. And I haven't come across any personality tests or assessment or gift inventories or discernment processes that actively connect the gifts or the temperament or the personality traits or design with our core self, right? That's a distinction. I mean, to be fair, I don't think that's what personality tests are for generally, but for our purposes, when we talk about the interior journey and the interior life, it is important for us to know how these tests that we take to learn more about ourselves, how they may connect with our core, how they may help us to integrate and grow more integrated or more grounded in our core self, right? So looking at that dimension of the 3 layers of life, that's one way of looking at personality tests, and realizing that most of them touch only on the outermost layer and maybe a little bit on the inner layer. Another way of looking at personality tests and interior journey would be through self-knowledge. Okay, so another thing that I have talked about in my content and put out in my Instagram post before is that self-knowledge, there are 4 layers of self-knowledge. Okay, this is the way I see it. Okay, it's kind of like my little paradigm to help us see that there are layers to self-knowledge. In order to help the interior journey, the resource needs to be integrated and applied to all 4 layers of self-knowledge. So just a bit of a review. What are the 4 layers of self-knowledge? The first layer is an intellectual layer. So, intellectual self-knowledge. Second layer is experiential. Third layer is affective. And the 4th layer is what I call unitive self-knowledge. So intellectual knowing or intellectual self-knowledge is knowing how we are seen through the mirroring by other people, by society. For example, we know about kind of like ourselves, sometimes the way we're mirrored. We hear about how people see us. We take that information, to add on to our catalog of, this seems to be how people see me. Maybe this is how I am. And when we take personality tests and assessments, to some degree, that would also fit or feed into our intellectual knowing of ourselves, right? Because we're borrowing on the expertise of others through, let's say, the design of these kinds of assessment and tests to catch a glimpse of ourselves through a particular perspective. And this gives us some information that maybe we didn't have before about ourselves. So learning about and understanding our behaviors, our temperament, our personality, for example. But conceptually, right? So that's part of intellectual knowing. And this is a very important part of self-knowledge, of course. But it is, again, in a sense, you could say, it's just the first layer of self-knowledge. The second layer, which is what I call experiential knowing or experiential self-knowledge, would be things I know about myself through personal experience. So my parents may tell me what they have observed about me, right? I can choose to believe them or not. Let's say what they tell me what I was like as a child. That could be part of the data that I use to develop my self-understanding. But then how I experience myself is a different thing. And sometimes maybe how I experience myself, if I pay attention to my lived experiences, may not always be aligned with what other people think about me, how they see me, right? So that's important. It's distinct. In fact, for personality tests to be really good and accurate and when it's actually properly applied, okay, it takes into consideration our experiential knowing as well, which is why just sitting down and doing like an online quiz or a test, that isn't quite enough actually, because that doesn't take into account your experiential knowing. Okay, so things that you know about yourself, discovering more about yourself through experimenting with different activities, opportunities, environments, where you show up best, where you're most motivated, where you're most joyful, where you're most alive. That's experiential knowing of yourself. And that's a very important dimension too in learning about yourself. But up to this point, even if you grow in intellectual and experiential knowledge about yourself, you're still not in relationship with yourself. And that's important, okay? You're still not in relationship with yourself. So the third layer, what I call affective knowing of yourself, is learning to listen to my inner self through attuning, right? Attuning to my body, my thoughts, my emotions. This is learning to be with myself, learning to feel my feelings, learning to sit with my uncomfortable emotions, for example. So it's affective knowing of myself is becoming a safe, hospitable, compassionate presence to the parts of me, especially that are fearful and wounded and in exile. Affective self-knowledge is the building of a loving relationship with myself. The interior journey absolutely has to include this dimension of self-knowledge, okay? And then the fourth layer of self-knowledge, even deeper, or it builds on all the preceding three layers, would be what I call unitive knowing or unitive self-knowledge. And that would be not just learning to listen to and attune to myself, right? It's building on that after we have that relationship or that the foundation of a good relationship with ourselves, learning how to lead ourselves. That's another level higher than just loving. We only follow someone that we trust loves us usually, right? And if there is someone that we allow ourselves to be led by, let's say into becoming more ourselves, into achieving or accomplishing things that on our own we wouldn't have, that's usually a mark of a good leader, right? So when it comes to self-leadership, it's the same thing. In order for us to exercise really effective self-leadership, it's actually this layer, this deepest layer of self-knowing, right? Having earned our own trust, in a sense, we learn to apply what we know about us, right? Like the particular unique traits about us, what drives us, what energizes us, what we're weak in, what we try and avoid, maybe what our fears are. Where is it that we need more patience? Where is it that we need more compassion? Where is it that we can be challenged? What is our capacity? So all these things become part of not just effective knowing, but the unitive knowing, because this is being used to lead us into greater integration, right? Together with the Holy Spirit. It's kind of like a leaning into the grace of God and the prompting of the Holy Spirit, but really exercising that self-leadership as well into becoming increasingly present to ourselves and to God's presence within me, becoming my true self in God. So that would be unitive knowing. And that's the deepest layer of self-knowledge. So most personality tests, clearly, they're focused more outward, right, on equipping you for productivity, to be more effective, maybe at work and leadership, or to build a better team, to make you maybe more effective in service, for example, in ministry, or maybe in your relationships. Those are still more kind of like outward, right? They really don't naturally help you to develop effective and unitive self-knowledge. Now, the whole point of the interior journey also is, of course, that if we really wanted to be truly fruitful and effective, whether it's as a leader or at work, in our relationships, all of that, it's not enough to just build our skills or grow in, self-development just on the performance aspects of it. For example, what we need is interior integration, because then we are more self-regulated, we're emotionally more mature, we are more restful and at peace, more intentional, discerning. Generally, that would make us, you could say, more effective. Well, I don't want to say necessarily effective in the way that you understand, maybe from just a secular or worldly point of view, because sometimes being effective in being who we are, or being fruitful in God's kingdom by being who we are, may seem to be at odds with worldly success, right? So really at the deepest level, this would still be our alignment with who we are, regardless of how we are received, whether we're seen as successful or not. From time to time, what we're going after in the interior journey is about trusting that being who we are, as God designed us, is exactly what the world needs, even if in a sense the world does not realize it yet. Okay? So most personality tests don't go that deep on their own, and they touch on maybe the first two layers only of self-knowledge, which is intellectual and experiential, like I mentioned. Okay, and also personality tests usually don't help you distinguish between your learned programming, your life scripts, which are often your trauma responses, right? They don't often distinguish between that and your innate, kind of like naturally given, gifted preferences and strengths. And the reality is, and I've mentioned this before as well in my content, just like Dr. Gabor Mate says, often what we see as our personality, right, how we are experienced by others and by ourselves, is a blend or a mix of both what is naturally given to us, our natural traits, and how we were designed, as well as our trauma responses, the ways that we have learned to cope and survive in the world. Okay, so we can develop by nurture or by training skills that we didn't have natural gifts in, for example. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But when we don't distinguish between in a sense, our scripts and our natural design, or the way God created us, we may find ourselves in the grip of survival scripts, and we don't realize that actually we're not living from a place that's free and authentic, right? We don't notice that the energy is different. And in that case, if we continue to try and discern our personal vocation, we're kind of like discerning with faulty data, right? It's fine if we know that now we have a set of skills that we learned and trained in, even if initially it was out of a trauma response. But when we know that wasn't, and that's a trauma response, we know how to pay attention to if it's taken over us or if it is just complementing, right? Like the skill that we have learned that, from a trauma response, for example, or if it's complementing and supporting the design, the natural design that God has actually given us. That's very, very different, right? So in the interior journey, making this distinction between so-called like our true self and false self is very important, because we wish to live from our true self and we want to loosen the hold that our trauma responses have on us, right? We can acknowledge them, we want to integrate these parts of us, but we do not want to let them lead us. And if we don't make this distinction, and most personality tests don't make this distinction, you won't be able to really make that progress within the interior journey. Okay, so it's limited in its helpfulness. I just want to say also that sometimes if you find that over your life and as you grow in your interior journey and you take some of these personality tests again, you get a different result. It's easy to think, oh, maybe the assessment is just not that accurate. It keeps changing. Well, that's because, like I mentioned, there are many reasons for this. One of the reasons would be that precisely if we can't tell that the difference between, let's say, our scripts and our trauma responses and how we actually really are, when we answer the questions to these assessments, we can be answering from our trauma responses, right? Or our learned scripts, or from the training that we have to operate in a certain way instead of our real preference. And if we lack self-awareness, we won't even realize that we are answering from those scripts or from those training, and it's not really our natural self, okay? And sometimes when we become more integrated and healed, and then we take the same test again, maybe, we get a different set of results because this time maybe we're answering more from our true self, okay? So the issue isn't so much about the validity or accuracy of the test, like I want to illustrate, is that these tests are not designed to pick out this distinction between our life scripts and our natural strengths. Okay, so I will talk a bit about how I get around that issue in clarity, okay? Because this is an issue that I realized not just through my own journey, but through guiding different clients through MCODE and MBTI. That's when I realized, I need to do something to help make that distinction between their trauma responses, the life scripts, before they take these instruments, so that there's a higher chance that when they answer those questions, they are answering from their true self. Okay, so one question that I sometimes get asked is why do I choose the motivation code and the Myers-Briggs, okay, particularly the Myers-Briggs step 2 as the instruments to use? I'm certified in both these instruments. So clearly there was a decision process behind that. Why did I choose these 2 instruments to be certified in? I've done for myself many different other assessments, and they've all been fun and helpful to a certain extent. But why I decided to invest in training and being licensed and continue to pay these companies money, these companies money in order to be able to use their instruments, right? I'll say a little about that, why they MCODE and MBTI, especially the MBTI step 2, and also how are they being customized for the interior journey within clarity, all right? Okay, so why these instruments? The short answer, the most direct answer would be that in my own application, so I'm like my own client zero, right? Patient zero, client zero. If it doesn't help, if it hasn't been helpful to me, I wouldn't think of recommending it to others. Generally, I have to have tested it and experienced how it is helpful before I then use it to develop a resource, right, that can help somebody else. So these 2 instruments are the ones that I have found over the long term the most helpful and given me the greatest leverage in my ongoing interior journey, okay? For much more in-depth self-knowledge. So the focus here is self-knowledge, not team building, not, building my marriage, all that kind of thing. I mean, all these instruments can potentially have those applications, right? But the application of my greatest interest is in this interior journey, in becoming my authentic self, in helping me become a whole and come alive and discover my unique path in life. Okay, so that's also what personal vocation discernment is. So in this specific application, in my experience, these are the 2 instruments that I have consistently found to be helpful. All right, so the motivation code is the only narrative-based assessment, okay, out there currently that is powered by stories. Stories here is your own fulfillment stories. Okay, so it requires you to look into your life and to remember and recall particular stories where you were like really alive, for example. So there's a process and to choose different stories in order to use it for the assessment. Okay, within clarity, I give even in this area, I give additional help on how to choose the best stories to get the most accurate results for your MCODE. Because in my experience with previous clients, again, I have found that sometimes people don't choose the best stories for this instrument, and there are different reasons for that, right? That's a different investigation I went through to understand that. So I have refined the process every time I've done this with a new batch of clients to make it easier for them to know how to choose a story so that the stories yield the results that that is supposed to yield in that sense. Okay, and because this is based on stories, it's your own narrative as well as science. So there are two components to this assessment. One is about your stories. The process itself really lends itself to reflection and deeper engagement and attunement with your inner self in a way that is really quite a lot deeper than any other personality assessments and tests that I have experienced. Okay, so that in itself is one, I think, really strong point for the MCODE. And it looks at your motivation design and your motivational flow. So it kind of like looks not at just the way you think or act. It looks at what fires you up, what keeps you going, and what you're really motivated to kind of like accomplish. Okay, not so much the task, but in terms of motivational energy, what gets you going up, what gets you going, what makes you come alive, and what keeps you persevering. When we are motivated, this is what happens, right? We will persevere even when it's difficult. So the MCODE looks at basically how were you designed motivationally. Okay, so that's the MCODE. And then the Myers-Briggs step 2, which is distinct from the step 1. Step 1 is what most people are aware of, which is just the 4 letters, and you have a lot of free online kind of assessments for the MBTI, which really I want to say is usually really, really not that accurate. And even the official instrument is never meant to be applied without a self-assessment. And you don't know how to do a self-assessment unless you're led through it by somebody who's trained and certified to do it. Okay, so basically, without going through a workshop or a one-on-one kind of a debrief or coaching, you won't really have done the actual Myers-Briggs instrument. Okay, now even then, okay, what I use is the step 2, which goes beyond just the usual 4 letters that you may be familiar with. You might hear things like INFJ, ENFP, ESTJ, all that kind of stuff, right? It goes into furthermore, between each of these facets, like extrovert, introvert, they look at 5 additional facets within introversion and extroversion to capture nuances. So 2 extroverts, for example, may have very different looking facets. You could be a very enthusiastic introvert, for example, or you could be a very intimate extrovert. So intimate extrovert don't like being in crowds, don't like big groups, may not have a very large circle of friends. An intimate extrovert, which I happen to be, by the way, much prefers really small group, one-to-one, compared to sometimes they could have an introvert that is gregarious and, generally has a much wider circle or social circle of friends, maybe even more than an intimate extrovert. So that's just an example of the nuance that step 2 in MBTI goes into. And I think when we are trying to talk about deeper self-knowledge, this is important. And why I like this, I find myself utilizing what I know from the MBTI step 2 the most in a day-to-day manner to lead myself more gently, more compassionately, and more effectively to do what I need to do. Okay, as I live from a motivational design, I know what I'm motivated by. I know how to lean into my motivation, but there are very sometimes concrete steps that you need to take to accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish. And knowing my own MBTI, especially the step 2 nuanced MBTI, helps me to be patient with myself and know how to, influence myself, you could say, to lead myself in a way that is sustainable. Okay, so that's what I lean on, or how I lean on the MBTI step 2 for my own interior journey, to be more authentic and integrated in my life. Okay, so I found that using these 2 instruments together helps us to know ourselves intellectually and experientially, right? Those first 2 layers from more complementary perspectives, from 2 very complementary perspectives, and they kind of strengthen each other. Okay, so that's why I chose those 2 instruments. Now, within clarity, there's an additional difference, right? Because I mentioned earlier that all these tests were not in and of themselves designed to help the interior journey. So within the journey for clarity, we don't go straight into looking at your motivational design or your personality and temperament. We don't go straight into the instruments. The first part is about attuning a bit more to ourselves and trying to surface and become more aware of our life scripts. The person that you've always felt driven that you needed to be, right? Because when you're aware of that, then we also lead you through, there's a process I lead you through to connect with how it feels in your body. Actually, it's not me. I actually get my friend and collaborator, Edwina Yao, whom you may recognize from my podcast that I've done a few episodes with her. So she's great at leading this, somatic experience, somatic kind of like exercises to get you more in touch with your body and how you feel and all that. So she's like a guest facilitator that I do bring on for clarity at certain key points. And this is one of the things I ask her to help, my clients go through an exercise to experience what it's like, how it feels in their body when they are trying to be the person that they think they should be versus when they are living from kind of like who they are. In your body, it actually feels different, right? So when you recognize how differently it feels, it makes it easier later when you're selecting stories, for example, for the MCODE, to know whether you're selecting the right stories. If you're selecting stories that actually do highlight those moments when you're living from your true self, your body, your nervous system kind of feels a certain way, right? If you chose a story because in your mind that was a great fulfillment story, you felt that you were really good at something, but you check in with how your body's feeling when you are remembering that memory, it may signal to you that there might be some survival energy there. There could be some drivenness there. You could be acting out of your life script there. Okay, so that's why that part is a huge, very important difference that I bring into clarity. And also the praxis assignments and exercises, so whether it's kind of like the homework in between sessions or the exercises that you're doing in the live session, sometimes they facilitate effective self-knowledge, okay? So that layer of tuning to ourselves, listening to ourselves, accepting ourselves, and that lays the very important groundwork that you can continue to build on beyond clarity into learning to lead yourself. So that's the huge difference. I'll say huge because I really do think it's huge. This is these are very important dimensions for the interior journey. Okay, and that's what personality tests on their own, for example, they cannot bring. And that's how I weave these things together within clarity to facilitate that journey for my clients in a small group, traveling in a sense, on this interior pilgrimage as a little band of, a little fellowship, right? A band of pilgrims, okay? And last slide here before I look at, I think there are some questions would be, so really, who would clarity help? Personality tests can, on their own, personality tests can help a very wide range of people, at different stages of the journey for different purposes, okay? That's the beauty of personality tests and strengths finders and all that. But the way I put it together in clarity really is going to be, in a sense, it's meant for people at a certain stage in the journey. Then you will find it really helpful. If these don't really apply to you, then you're going to find it maybe a little hard to get into. You're not going to be able to reap the benefits of it, right? So clarity is designed for those who are ready to start integrating your shadows and not just feel safe by using your gifts. I say this from experience. In the past, when I did all these personality tests, a big part of it was because I wanted to know what my gifts were, what my strengths are, because these make me feel good about myself, because I always felt so bad about myself. I was never good enough, right? So I thought if I could learn what my gifts were or what my personality was, I would somehow figure out how to show up as my best self. But the reason behind that was because I didn't feel safe with myself. I wasn't ready to face my shadows. I didn't know how to integrate. I just wanted to feel safe, okay? If that's still where you are, then clarity is probably not for you. You need to be at least aware and ready to, aware that there are some shadows and, you have some basic sense of safety. Nobody's really mature in this, yet, but you've done some inner work and, already maybe in the past, and you're ready to look honestly at what might come up, right? So ready to start integrating your shadows, ready to stay longer at the being and not leaping into doing. Again, if you want to know about yourself so that you can just leap into doing more and be more effective, you might be impatient with how clarity unfolds because the focus of clarity is interior journey. There's a lot of focus on the sitting with and being with yourself as you discover who you are. It's helping you get to know yourself, build that relationship with yourself, okay? And building relationship is never about being productive. It's about learning to be with each other, in this case, you with yourself. You need to be eager to actually do the work yourself, to know yourself and not just be told, because that's how clarity is designed. It's not just a consultation method where I just lead you through something and I tell you this is what you are. I have created the curriculum. In a sense, I've broken down the process that I learned as the certified, practitioner of these instruments. I've broken down the process so that you can step by step follow it through in a way yourself, with my help and guidance, of course. But it's a way it's teaching you to fish and not just handing you the fish, right? With that deeper engagement, you actually learn more about yourself and you understand more about this instrument, so that even hopefully years after, you've done this, you remember enough, you keep using it. You want to come back and keep using it so that you will get more leverage and mileage out of them, just like I have. That's the hope, okay? And also, very importantly, it'll help people who are, even after putting in all that work, willing to accept the uncertainty of the outcome of this journey, because that's the reality of the interior journey. We never really know what we will find out, and we never really know what will happen. We can trust that whatever we do learn and find out will not be wasted, right? But so often in the interior journey, we just don't know until we're there what the so-called outcome at the end of this, let's say the 8 months of clarity would be. Right? So if all these points kind of like sit right with you, then it could be helpful for you. All right, so now let me take a look at the questions. Here's a question. You mentioned before that people get attached to their charisms or which ones they want. I find that identifying with our MBTI types can be very similar. Do you have past clients go through similar things, similar feelings of disappointment? Yes, not just for the MBTI, but for the MCODE as well. Sometimes, so, there's always a range, right? Sometimes people are like, oh, this is so amazing because now I feel understood, I feel seen, it's so accurate. That's one frequent response. But also another frequent response would be, oh, like, why? Like, why is this me, And those are important moments. And that's where the practice exercises for attunement come in, because these are important moments to sit with the what it's interesting that that's the reaction, and get curious about why that reaction is there. And a lot of times it has to do with our life scripts. When things emerge from, our real self, let's say we do this instrument. So I have clients who say it's true, like I realize it's true, but I don't like it, right? So why do you not like it? If you go a little further in that, we may realize, oh, it's because this is very different from what was valued in my family of origin, or this was even maybe despised or looked down upon in my family of origin. So for example, I've had a client before who is really is a very creative type, right? And her gifts and her motivations are in the creative type, but she, in her family, is surrounded by entrepreneurs and business people, thinking people, very practical people who think that the arts and creativity is just a waste of time. So that made her also kind of like, in a sense, dismiss or minimize what was coming up, right? At least that was a kind of like first response. That's why I say for these tests to help us in our interior journey, we need to go beyond just doing the tests. There's additional work, all right? Yes. Oh, Erica, I love your responses here. The differentiation between true self and false self is so difficult. Yeah, and the shifts in identity is difficult to cope with sometimes too. Yes. And they totally relate to the desire to only use the gifts to be the best self in the past. Yes. So, I mean, it's not that there's anything wrong with wanting to be our best self, right? But I think we often don't realize that the energy behind us wanting to be our best self is because we don't feel safe and we feel like we need to be better, to be more accepted, to be more worthy of love, to be a better child of God or whatever that is. It's very, very different when we are grounded in our belovedness as who we are, when we have that self-acceptance and self-love. And then in a sense, you don't have to push yourself to be your best self anymore. You just naturally blossom into your best self. You bear the fruit that you're meant to bear, because really that was what you were designed to bear. It's a very different experience, vis-a-vis kind of like striving to try to be the best version of ourselves. So thank you for that one question. I don't see any other questions right now. But if you're watching this on replay or you're hearing this on the podcast and you have some questions, please just, can send me a DM in Instagram or send me an email and I'll be happy to address that perhaps in a future video. So that's it for today's live. Thank you for watching and sharing. And until the next time, take care. Bye.